Welcome back everybody. Let's see now how we can actually call our port scanner class into our vulnerability scanner program. Alright, so we have everything ready right here. We switched everything that we needed to. We also added some of the lists, some of the specific attributes to this class. We changed some of the functions as well as deleted the getBanner method from this class. And we also added the conversion of IP address into the scanPort method. Alright? So now that what we need to do is we need to see how we can create an object that will belong to this class and how we can use it inside of our vulnerability scanner program. Well, right away I can tell you that this will not work because with this we're simply specifying the name of the file that we imported and then the function. But this function no longer exists as a separate function inside of the port scanner. That function is now the actual method to the port scan class. So in order to actually call that, we first of all need to create an object that will belong to that class. And we can simply call that object target. So simple as that. Target will be our object, and in order to initiate that object to belong to the port scan class, we first of all need to specify the port scanner, which is the file that we are using the class from, and then the name of the class itself. Now, you will notice that if I specify the open and close brackets, PyCharm will suggest right away that this port scan class takes two parameters. The first parameter will be the target's IP address and the number of ports that we want to scan for the vulnerable software. Now, why does it say these two parameters? Well, inside of our port scanner class, you will notice that we have two variables inside of our init method. And these two variables are exactly what we need to specify to our object. So we need to know the target's IP address as well as the number of ports. So let's specify that. We already prompted to the user for these two values, therefore we can simply just specify right here target's IP and then comma port number. Alright? And we successfully created the object to our port scan class. Right now, in order to initiate the scan itself, so we can scan for the open ports and retrieve the banners to those open ports, we need to initiate the method from this class. And how do we do that? We need to initiate a method onto our object from the port scanner class. So how can we do that? Well, first of all, we need to check which method we need to initiate. And ideally, we want to initiate one method which will call all of the other methods as well. And in our case, that method would be the scan function, as the scan method calls the scanPort method, and the scanPort method calls the checkIP method, as well as checks for the banners and adds them to the list. So we need to type right here target.scan. And simply with just these two lines, we perform the entire scan for open ports and softwares on our target's IP address. All we're left to do right now is compare those banners that we retrieved from the open ports with the banners that we will have in a separate file that we're going to create in just a second. And if we find a match, that means that we found a vulnerable software. Alright, so first of all, we need to perform something, and that will be the scanning of a target. And then we're going to add 2 or 3 banners to the actual txt file, which then we're going to use. Well, let me just show you. It is easier if I just show you. First of all, I will enlarge this, zoom this in, and I will navigate to our PyCharm projects as well as the port scanner project. And here, if I simply just python portscanner.py, and let's say we test this website, testphp.vulnweb.com, press here enter, it will scan for the open ports and we will retrieve some banners from it. Then we're going to copy these banners and add them into a txt file, which then we will use inside of this program. So let's say we want to copy first 2 banners. Alright, we're just going to wait for a few seconds for this scan to finish. And keep in mind, we are using the port scanner tool that we created, so you can see it can be sometimes useful, especially when you try to gather more information about the target's machine. Alright, so here it is, it has finished. Now let's copy this. We don't need that IP address, we're going to copy this. Then right here under the Vault Scanner, we're going to click on New, but instead of new Python file, we simply just want to create new file. It will be called, let's say, vol_file, or no, let's not call it like the actual variable. wallbanners.txt. Let's call it just like that, and then right here we're going to paste this as a first banner, and as a second banner we're going to paste, let's say, this. Copy selection and paste it right here. Alright, so here it is. We got two banners ready. And now let's see if we manage to find these two matches with our vulnerability scanner. Okay, so first of all, what we need to do in order to compare the banners with the banners from the file, we need to open that file first. So how can we do that? Well, in Python we do it with this statement. So with open, and then open and close brackets, and first parameter to this open function would be the file name, which is stored inside of this vol file variable. So with open vol_file, and the second parameter would be how you want to actually open it. In our case, we want to open that file for reading, so we want to read from it. You also have the write and append option, but in this case we're going to open the file for reading, which we specify just by simply typing r. And then we specify as, and then the name of the file object as file. Let's call it like that. So with open vulnerability file for reading as file. Then we need to perform the comparison of these banners. What we're going to do first is we're going to add a count variable, which will be equal to 0. And then we're going to take a look at all of the banners that we gathered during our scan. Alright, so how can we do that? We can access those banners by simply typing target.banners. How can we do that? Well, since we created this object right here, this object, besides these two variables, also has these two variables right here, or these two lists, should I say. So we can also access them as well if we want to, using our object. So target banners, and what we want to do with that is we want to iterate over it. So for banner in target.banners, we first of all want to navigate to the beginning of our wallbanners.txt file, and we can do that using file.seek 0. And the reason why we need this line is because in case we remove this, it will only find the first result and it will not manage to find the second result, because it will take the first banner, then it will iterate over all of the banners inside of this list, and if it finds it, it will be stuck at the end of the actual file, and it will not get back to read it from the beginning for the next banner. It will just read it from where it stopped. That's why after every banner we need to actually seek to the beginning of this file, which we do using file.seek 0. 0 means simply return to the beginning and read all over again. And now we need to iterate once again. So for line in file.readlines, and you will notice that we actually have two functions right here. One is readline and one is readlines. If you use readline, it will only read one characters one by one. So we don't really want that. We want to use readline, so it actually reads line by line. So let's just type it right here for line in file.readlines. And since this is a function, we need open and close brackets. And now we can compare the banners. If line.strip, we want to strip it from anything that might cause some problems in matching these two banners. And keep in mind that this line is simply just a line from the txt file. For example, it can be this. And then we need to compare that with the banners from this list right here. So if line.strip in banner that we are currently reading from this list. So if line.strip in banner, and then here we want to print, let's print it like this. So open single quote, two exclamation marks, and let's print in capital letters, for example, vulnerable banner. And then let's also add double quotes to our actual string, so we can add it between the banner plus the banner itself, plus, and then single quotes, double quote at the beginning, and then on port. And let's print it like this, plus the string. And here we want to actually print the port number corresponding to that specific banner. So how can we do that? Well, that is why we need this count variable. since this count variable will keep a track of each element that we pass by scanning each and every banner, so each and every banner will correspond to the exact same number of elements inside of this open ports list right here. So for example, if the count variable came to number 3, that means we are scanning third banner, and that third banner will be correspondent to the third element of the open ports list, which will be the actual port number to that specific banner. So in order to access that list, we need to type the target object dot open ports. We can access it the same way that we access the banners, so dot open ports. And here we need to specify which element are we looking for, and we specify that in the square brackets right here. So then we add right here count. So simple as that. For some reason we are getting these red lines in, for example, line.strip port scanner.port scan. And why is that? Well, let's just finish this so we don't forget the last line, which will be to actually increase the count variable by 1. And you need to keep in mind where are you actually increasing it, inside of which loop. Well, you want to increase it inside of this loop, but you don't want to increase it inside of this loop. So you want to increase it after you pass every banner. You increase the element by 1 because you proceed to the next banner in the list. Therefore, we want to increase it right here. So count plus equals 1. Okay, so everything seems to be working correctly. We just seem to have a bunch of errors right here, but let's try to run the program so we can see what type of errors are those. So we'll scan.py, and it says right here invalid syntax. Let's see where that is. Invalid syntax inside of the vol file. Okay, so we have a bracket extra, so let's delete this. Try it once again. Oh no, we actually do not have a bracket extra. We're not even fixing the correct part. It is inside of this vol file. Yeah, we have an extra square bracket right here, so let's delete that. And if I run it once again, we can notice that we no longer have any error. So this extra bracket right here created us the problem throughout the entire program. So now that we fixed it, this should work. Enter target to scan for vulnerable open ports. Let's type test.php.vulnweb.com. We want to scan for first 100 ports because both of the vulnerable softwares are located inside of the first 100 ports. And we want to enter the path to the file with vulnerable softwares. Well, in our case, since the actual file is inside the same directory as our program, we don't need to specify the path. We can simply just specify the file name. But if this file was in another directory, you would need to specify the full path to that directory. In our case, wallbanners.txt. Press here enter, and now we wait for it to perform the scan first of the first 100 ports. Then it will go to this iteration right here with opening of the file and then comparing the banners, and if it manages to find the banner that matches in both of the banners list and the actual file that we open, then it will print that the vulnerable software has been found. Alright, so let's see right here. It might take a few seconds to finish. And here it is. We found two vulnerable banners, as it prints right here. Vulnerable banner with this name right here on port 21, and vulnerable banner with this name on port 22. Alright, so good. We managed to find the vulnerable banners, and now we can simply just proceed to exploit the target with these two vulnerabilities. Alright, so that would be about it for this vulnerability scanner. As you can see, it is not really that big of a project. It is mostly based on our port scanner. We simply just compare the actual banners from the file and the scan itself, and then we print it out. Alright, so once again, this is something that you can download from the internet, or you can simply just create it by yourself, just by adding multiple vulnerable banners to this list and then creating your own list. And then you can use this program in order to scan the target. In the next video, we're going to perform the recap of this actual project. We're going to see once again how this program works, briefly explain it once again in case there is something that you missed or did not understand, and then we're going to proceed to our next project. Thank you for watching and see you in the next lecture. Bye!